I'm Ryan O'Doud, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine YouTube channel. Today we continue with Section 9.9 of the Incarnation of Ahriman by Rudolph Steiner. We're picking up at the beginning of Lecture 4, Dornoch, on the 2nd of November, 1919. The lecture yesterday will have shown you that if we are to acquire insight into the nature and evolution of humanity, we must be constantly mindful of the power and influence of Lucifer, of Christ, and of Ahriman. These influences were, of course, already at work in earlier stages of cosmic evolution, but in spheres where it was unnecessary for people to have clear consciousness of their effects. On the other hand, the very purpose of our fifth post-Atlantean epoch is that human beings should become increasingly conscious of what works through them into earthly existence. The unveiling of many more of the secrets of human life would be desirable at the present time, if only there were greater willingness to face things frankly and objectively. For without the knowledge of certain facts of the kind indicated yesterday, it will not be possible for humanity to make progress, either in the inner life or in the social sphere. Think only of something that is connected with the social problems we have recently been studying. We've tried to show the need for separating spiritual and cultural life, and also the political life and of life of rights from economic life. Our greatest concern is to create conditions throughout the world, or at least, for we cannot do more at present, to convince people of the need to create conditions which would provide the foundation for a free cultural life, no longer dependent upon the other spheres of society, or as deeply entangled as it is today in economic life on the one hand, and the political life of the state on the other. Civilized humankind must either establish the autonomy of spiritual and cultural life or face collapse, leaving Asiatic cultures responsible for humanity's development in the future. Those who still do not recognize the gravity of the present situation in the world are also, in a certain respect, helping to prepare for Ahriman's incarnation. Many things in external life today bear witness to this. The Ahrimanic incarnation will be greatly furthered if people fail to establish a free and independent life of spirit and culture, allowing it to remain entangled in economic and political life. Ahrimanic powers have everything to gain from spiritual and cultural life becoming ever more closely interknit with these other spheres. To Ahrimanic powers, a free spiritual life would seem a kind of darkness, and people's interest in it a burning, raging fire. This free spiritual life is essential for establishing the right attitude, the right relationship to Ahriman's incarnation in the future. But there is still a strong tendency today to conceal the facts of which we spoke yesterday. The vast majority of people cast a veil over these things. They refuse to see them as they really are and allow themselves to be deceived by words which have no connection with reality. And very often, efforts to shirk reality are described as honest and well-meaning. Take, for example, the recently published letter from Romain Rolland, in which he says that people should not allow themselves to be deluded by previous proclamations from the victorious powers about justice and safeguarding political rights. The treatment which Russia is receiving from the Entente has led him to speak in these terms. He says, no matter whether it comes from monarchies or republics, what has been said about rights and justice is so much phrase-mongering. The issue is one of power, and of power alone. Now, even this apparent insistence on reality still betrays a willingness to be deluded, for Romain Rolland is just as deluded as ever. Such delusion could only diminish if such people were to get beyond mere phrases and recognize that all these things to which they aspire are meaningless unless they realize that the old unified state as such, whether a democracy, a republic, or a monarchy, will be the high road to Ahriman's incarnation unless it becomes threefold. Hence all these things, including the recent letter addressed to the world by Romain Rolland, amount to nothing more than rhetoric. People do not grasp the reality, for reality can be grasped only when the necessity for spiritual knowledge and deep penetration into the nature of things is thoroughly understood. You all are familiar with the much-quoted verse, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God." Do people really take these lines seriously? They utter them, but so often as mere phrases. No particular importance is attributed to the tense. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Word here must obviously have the meaning it bore in ancient Greece. It is not word as understood today, word as a mere designating sound, but inner spiritual reality. And the imperfect tense is employed. The imperfection, therefore, is in the beginning the Word was, but it is no longer. Otherwise the sentence would run, and now is the Word. But the Word is not with God, it was with God, and a God was the Word, but is no longer. That is what we read in the Gospel of St. John. Otherwise, what would be the meaning of the words immediately following, "And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us"? This indicates a further evolution of the word. Word here also means anything that human beings can acquire in the way of intellectual wisdom through their efforts and through their intelligence. But it must be quite clear to us that what the word denotes here is not really the goal for which humanity must strive at the present time or the immediate future. To express what is now the goal, we should have to say, let human beings seek for the Spirit that reveals itself in the Word, for the Spirit is with God, and the Spirit is a God. Mankind must press on from the Word to the Spirit to perception and knowledge of the Spirit. When I remind you of these first verses of the Gospel of St. John, you will realize what little inclination there is today to take such things seriously and to get beyond arbitrary interpretations, so often accepted in matters of the greatest moment. Human intelligence itself must be quickened and illumined by what is revealed in spiritual vision. Not the actual seership is essential. What matters is the fact that the fruits of spiritual vision shall be understood. I have repeatedly emphasized that today it is not the seer alone who can apprehend the truth of clairvoyant experience. This apprehension is within the power of everyone at the present time because the spiritual capacities of human beings are sufficiently mature if they resolve to exercise them and are not too indolent to do so. But if the level befitting humanity is to be achieved, such things as were mentioned in the lecture yesterday must be taken in deep earnestness. I used a trivial example to show you how easy it is to be deluded by figures and numbers. Is there not a great deal of superstition where numbers are concerned? What can in some way be counted is accepted in science. Science loves to weigh, to compute, and social science loves statistics. Again, a matter of computation and reckoning. It will be difficult indeed for people to bring themselves to admit that all knowledge of the external world acquired through measure and number is so much a delusion. To measure, what does it mean in reality? It means to compare something with a given dimension, be it length or volume. I can measure a line if I compare it with a line twice, 3 times, 4 times, etc. In such measurements, no matter whether of lengths or surfaces or weights, the qualitative element is entirely lacking. The number 3 always remains the same whether one is counting sheep, human beings, or politicians. It's not a matter of quality, but merely quantity. The essential principle of volume and number is that the qualitative aspect is left out of account. But for that very reason, all knowledge derived from the principles of volume and measure is illusion. And the fact which must be taken in all seriousness is that the moment we enter the world that can be weighed and measured, the world of space and time, we enter a world of illusion, a world that is nothing but a mirage as long as we take it to be reality. The ideal of contemporary thinking is to experience all the things of the external world of space and time in terms of their spatial and temporal significance alone, whereas in truth what things signify in space and time is their external aspect only. And we must transcend space and time, penetrating to much deeper levels if we are to reach the innermost truth, the innermost essence of things. And so a future must come when people will be able to say, yes, with my intelligence, I can apprehend the external world in the way that is inherent to science as its ideal. But the perspective I gain from this is wholly Ahrimanic. This does not mean that science should be ignored or dismissed. It is a matter of realizing that this kind of science leads only to Ahrimanic illusion. Why then do we need science despite the fact that it leads only to illusion? Because we are now on a descending curve of evolution. Of the 4th post-Atlantean epoch, the Greco-Latin epoch, we can say that humanity was relatively speaking at the zenith of its knowledge. But now in the 5th post-Atlantean epoch, human beings are already on the path of decline. They are already growing physically weaker, and to perceive the world in the way the Greeks perceived it would be too much for their strength. That is something we are not told in history. Just imagine what modern historians would have to say about it, those worthy historians who describe Greece as if they were describing some region of their own time, because they do not know that the Greeks looked out into nature with different eyes, listened with different ears, and from those of modern people. These historians do not tell us that modern human beings would suffer from constant headache or migraine if they were to see and hear in the outer world all that the Greeks saw and heard. The Greeks lived with infinitely greater intensity in the world of the senses. Our own apprehension of this world has already greatly weakened. To be able to bear it, a mirage has to be in as presented to us. And not only what we perceive with the senses, but more particularly our scientific conceptions too are a kind of dream about the external world. The greatest dreamers where the external world is concerned are precisely those who pride themselves on being realistic in their thinking. Darwin and John Stuart Mill are fundamentally dreamers. The dreamers are the very people who claim to be thorough realists. But neither must we give ourselves up entirely to our inner life and impulses. From the way things have developed in the movement represented by the Theosophical Society, many of you will have realized the cultivation of the inner life alone, as attempted by numbers of people today, does not lead to a goal befitting humanity in the present age. An all too prevalent tendency is to make no free resolve to transcend ordinary life and attain higher vision, but rather to emphasize all that is not free in us. All kinds of hallucinatory tendencies, all kinds of faculties fraught with illusion come into play here. Thus concludes Section 9.9 of The Incarnation of Ahriman by Rudolph Steiner. Next week we shall continue with Section 9.10, picking up in the middle of Lecture 4. I will see you then. Olam.